The woman at the gate the afternoon sun beat down on the streets of New Delhi, casting long shadows across the pavement outside the Imperial Grand Hotel. Sleek black cars rolled up to the entrance, their drivers in crisp uniforms quickly stepping out to open the doors for important guests. The air was filled with the quiet hum of city life honking in the distance, murmured conversations, the occasional barking of a stray dog. Inside the hotel, the lobby gleamed with imported marble floors and elegant chandeliers. But outside the gates, the world was very different. On the edge of the driveway, near a rusted iron fence, sat a woman. Her sari was torn and faded, clinging loosely to her thin frame. Beside her sat two children, barefoot and quiet, their small hands round each other's shoulders. The woman held a metal bowl in her lap, not raising her voice like most beggars, not approaching anyone. She simply sat still, her dark eyes focused on the ground, occasionally glancing at the children to make sure they were okay. Inside one of those sleek cars, Sundar Pichai leaned back in his seat, scrolling through emails on his phone. He had just arrived in India for a 3-day conference about digital empowerment and education. His schedule was tight, but he had insisted on staying at this hotel. An old memory tied him to this place. He hadn't been back in nearly 2 decades. As the car slowed down to turn into the driveway, he glanced up, more out of habit than anything else. That's when he saw her. His eyes passed over the children, first two small, thin figures, probably no older than 8 or 9. Then they fell on the woman beside them. And something strange happened. Time seemed to freeze. The noise faded. For a split second, Sundar forgot to breathe. The angle of her face, the sharp curve of her nose, the scar above her right eyebrow. It couldn't be. It simply couldn't. The car came to a smooth stop, but Sundar didn't move. The driver turned around and gently said, "Sir, we've arrived." Still staring out the window, Sundar whispered, "Give me a minute." He stepped out slowly, his shoes touching the hot pavement. He adjusted the cuffs of his white shirt, brushed down his blazer, and began walking, though not toward the hotel entrance. Instead, he crossed the driveway and headed straight toward the woman sitting on the ground. As he got closer, he noticed the way she held herself. Her spine was straight, her expression calm, almost proud, even in the face of her condition. She didn't look up at him until he was only a few feet away. When she did, their eyes met, and something flickered across her face. Confusion, recognition, and then fear. Sundar opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. He had met thousands of people in his life, engineers, professors, world leaders. Yet in this moment, he felt like a child again, because he knew her, not just vaguely, not just maybe. He knew her from the past, and she had once meant something. He cleared his throat. "Are you ... do you remember me?" The woman narrowed her eyes and instinctively pulled the children closer. "Sir, please. I don't want trouble. We'll leave. We're not hurting anyone." No, that's not what I meant," Sundar said quickly, raising his hands gently. "I just ... I think I know you. From school. From Chennai. Your name is right?" Silence. The name hung in the air like a fragile thread. The woman's face turned pale. Her lips parted slightly, and her eyes widened. One of the children tugged at her arm, whispering something, but she didn't respond. "Meena?" Sundar repeated softly. A long pause passed before she nodded. Once, he took a slow breath. The world around him blurred, the honking horns, the shouting vendors across the street, even the polished hotel doors behind him. He was no longer the CEO of a global tech giant. In that moment, he was just a boy standing in front of a memory that had come to life in the most unimaginable way. How did this happen?" he asked, his voice nearly cracking. "You were brilliant. You were the best in class. You helped me with math. You used to say you wanted to build satellites." Meena's lips trembled. She looked down at her children, then back up at Sundar. "Life happened," she said. "Not all stories turn out the way they begin." He felt a lump rising in his throat. All those years ago, Meena had been a top student in their school. Confident, intelligent, respected. Even the teachers admired her. Sundar had been shy and unsure of himself, and she had often helped him after class. She never mocked his slow Tamil or his awkward questions. In fact, she had once told him, "You're going to do something big one day, Sundar. Don't let anyone make you feel small." He had never forgotten that dot, and now she sat before him in rags. The weight of guilt hit him like a brick. Not because he had caused this, but because he had forgotten her. Forgotten the people who helped him become who he was. He had moved to the US, gotten his degrees, climbed the ladder at Google, but somewhere along the way he had left pieces of his past behind. And now, here was one of those pieces, broken, weathered, but still here. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" he asked. Me and shook her head. "We sleep behind the railway station. It's not safe, but it's all we have." Sundar turned to his assistant, who had quietly joined them from behind. "Get 2 rooms in the hotel," he said firmly. "Now, sir." The assistant hesitated. "The manager not allow. Ben. Tell the manager I'll leave if they don't." The assistant hurried away. Meena stood up quickly. "No, Sundar, please. You don't have to do this. We'll be fine." "You're not fine," he said gently. "And I'm not doing this out of pity. I'm doing it because ... You once believed in me when no one else did. And I don't forget that." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she looked away, unwilling to let them fall in front of her children. The assistant returned moments later, out of breath. "Rooms are ready, sir. The manager said it's okay." Sundar knelt down to the children's level and smiled softly. "Would you like to sleep in a bed tonight, with clean sheets and warm food?" Both kids nodded slowly, unsure if this was a trick or a dream. Sundar reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key card. He handed it to Meena. "Go, rest, eat. We'll talk tomorrow." Meena took the card with trembling fingers, still looking at him like he was someone she couldn't quite believe was real. "Thank you," she whispered. Sundar watched as the hotel staff led them inside. For a moment he stood still, frozen in that intersection between past and present. Something deep inside had shifted. This trip was no longer just about keynote speeches and business meetings. Something bigger had begun. He pulled out his phone, opened the camera, and zoomed in on the scar above her eyebrow. It was faint, but it was there just like it had been that day she'd fallen during a school cricket match. And he'd helped her bandage it with a piece of his notebook. As he stared at that scar, a strange thought crossed his mind. What else? Had he forgotten? And more importantly, what had happened to Meena's dreams? Asterisk, a scar from the past. Next morning, Sundar Pichai stood by the tall windows of his hotel suite, watching the early light settle over the streets of Delhi. The city was already awake, rickshaws weaving through traffic, vendors calling out to passers-by, horns blaring from every direction. But his mind was far from the city's noise. He kept thinking about Meena, about the look in her eyes when he said her name. She hadn't cried, she hadn't begged, but in her silence, in the way she clutched her children close, there was a heaviness that haunted him. He hadn't slept much, not because of work, but because of memories that came rushing back like a river breaking its dam. He remembered the classroom with its cracked blackboard and creaky fans. He remembered Meena sitting at the front, answering every question with ease, her hand always the first to shoot up. He remembered how she used to stay behind after school, helping him understand equations that just wouldn't make sense to him. She had been so bright, so full of fire, always talking about the stars and how she wanted to send machines up into space. One day, she used to say, "I'll build something that touches the sky." And now that same girl had slept on the sidewalk with her children. The weight of that truth crushed Sundar in a way no business failure or public criticism ever had. Stepped away from the window and grabbed his phone. His schedule for the day was packed: panel discussions, investor meetings, press conferences, but he didn't care. Not now. He texted his assistant, "Cancel everything this morning. I need time." Then he made his way down the hallway to room 417. He stood outside for a moment, his hand hovering near the door. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a return to a part of he had buried, unintentionally or not. He knocked twice. After a pause, the door opened. Mina stood there, wrapped in a clean bathrobe, her wet hair slicked back. Behind her, he could see her children still curled up in bed, sleeping peacefully. "Good morning," he said gently. She nodded. "Come in." He stepped inside. The room was small but warm. There was a tray of untouched breakfast on the table, idlers, chutney, a glass of juice. The curtains were half drawn, letting in soft light. For the first time, he noticed how tired Mina looked, not just physically, but deep in her bones. Like someone who hadn't rested in years. "Did you sleep okay?" Sundar asked. "It was the first night we didn't hear rats scratching or men yelling outside," she said. "My daughter kept waking up just to make sure the sheets were real." Sundar smiled faintly, then sat down at the small table. "Me, and a dot. I need to understand. What happened to you?" She pulled the chair opposite him and sat down. Her hands rested in her lap. For a moment, she looked out the window. Then she began. "After high school, I got into Anna University. Full scholarship. My parents were so proud. I remember my father saying, 'My daughter's going to work for NASA one day.'" She smiled sadly. "First year went great. Second year, too. Then my father got sick. He had a heart condition. The hospital bills started piling up. My mother tried to pick up extra work, but it wasn't enough. And then one day, he was gone." Sundar leaned in, silent. "We couldn't afford to pay rent anymore," she continued. "We had to leave our apartment. My scholarship covered tuition, but not food, not books, not everything else. So I started skipping meals, selling my textbooks after each semester just to buy the next ones. I kept going for as long as I could, but eventually I fell behind." She paused, swallowing hard. "One professor offered help, but his help came with conditions. Disgusting conditions. I refused. After that, he failed me. Said I didn't complete the project. I had no one to fight for me. I dropped out after that semester." Sundar felt a cold rage bubbling inside him. The idea that someone had crushed Mina's future out of arrogance and power made his chest tighten. "I went back home. But home wasn't there anymore. My mother had moved to a village with relatives. I stayed in Chennai, tried to find work, got a job at a call center, met someone, got married. Thought I could build a life, but it didn't last. He left when I was pregnant with our second child. Said he wasn't meant to be tied down." "So you were alone," Sundar said softly. "Yes," she nodded. "Completely. I did sewing, washing, anything I could. Some nights I worked in food stalls. Some nights I cleaned offices. But when COVID came, everything shut down. I lost everything. And now this is where we are." The room was quiet for a long time. Then Sundar asked, "Why didn't you ever reach out to anyone?" "To me? To our old classmates?" She gave a half smile. "What would I say? Hi, remember me? I used to top the class. Now I sleep under bridges with my children. People don't like being reminded of what they left behind." "I would have helped," he said. "Maybe. But pride is a strange thing. It's the only thing I had left." Sundar nodded slowly, respecting her honesty. "Your children? What are their names?" "The girl is Asha. The boy is Vivek." "Beautiful names," he said. "What do they want to be?" "Asha wants to be a doctor. Vivek wants to drive a big bus. I just want them to have choices. Real choices." Sundar stood and walked to the window. His mind was racing. Not just with guilt, but with ideas. This wasn't about charity. It was about restoration. About setting right something the world had gotten terribly wrong. What if we gave them that? He asked, "What if we helped you start again?" Mina looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean a home. Education for the kids. Maybe even a job if you're ready. Not as a favor, but because I believe you still have something the world needs." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "Do you really think that after all this time, after all I'd lost, I still have something left?" "I know you do," he said. "You believed in me when I was just a skinny boy who stuttered in English class. Now let me return that faith. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It was full of quiet understanding. Then, almost timidly, Mina said, "There's something else." Sundar turned. She hesitated. "The man who failed me. The professor. I learned later. He did the same to other girls. One of them, she took her own life." Sundar's jaw clenched, but nothing ever happened to him. He still teaches. Still walks around like he owns the place. Sundar took a slow breath. "Do you want justice?" Mina nodded, eyes shining. "Not just for me. For all of us who were silenced." He nodded. "Then we'll start with that." Outside the window, the sun climbed higher into the sky. People rushed about their lives, unaware that something powerful was stirring behind the walls of that hotel. Ruined old friendship reborn, a broken life about to be mended, and the promise that justice would finally be served. But neither of them knew what was coming next, because deep in the shadows of the academic world, someone else had seen Mina's name resurface. Someone who wasn't ready for the truth to come. Out, asterisk the quiet storm afternoon, sun had mellowed into a pale golden hue as Sundar sat in the corner of the hotel's business lounge. His laptop open in front of him. His fingers moved slowly across the keyboard, not typing yet, just hovering, processing. Mina's story echoed in his head like a haunting song that refused to fade. The betrayal, the silence, the professor, the injustice. It wasn't just a personal tragedy. What had happened to her was systemic, and it wasn't isolated. He stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before finally beginning his search. He typed the name he hadn't thought about in years, Professor Dharmesh Basha. Within seconds, search results populated the screen. Articles, academic papers, awards, conferences. He was still active, still teaching at the same university. Anna. University had even promoted him to department head 2 years ago. There were glowing interviews, smiling photos with his arm around graduating students, and published research with titles about ethics in engineering education. The irony made Sundar's stomach turn, but deeper down the search results, after several pages, there were forums, anonymous posts, vague complaints, whispers. "He made me stay after class, ... And he locked the door. No one believed me. I was told to keep quiet or risk my scholarship. He threatened to fail me unless I cooperated. None of the names were public. No one had come forward officially. But the pattern was clear. He had done it before. He had done it again. And he had gotten away with it every time." Sundar sat back, his eyes darkening with resolve. He knew what he had to do. He called his legal team in India. "I want you to quietly look into past student complaints filed at Anna University between 2001 and 2021. He said, "especially involving Professor Basha. Use discretion. And don't go through official university channels. They'll bury it." His lawyer on the other end was stunned. "Sir, this could get messy. Are you sure you want to get involved?" "Messy is what happens when people look the other way," Sundar replied coldly. "Do it." He ended the call and leaned back in his chair. He was no longer just the man offering help to a struggling friend. He was stepping into a storm one that had been building quietly for decades. Later that evening, he met Mina again. The children were playing with new toys in the hotel garden, giggling and chasing each other through the grass. Mina sat on a bench, sipping tea, wearing simple clothes the hotel concierge had arranged for her. She looked better, not fixed, not whole, but better. "I did some digging," Sundar said as he sat beside her. "Your professor, he's still out there, and you weren't the only one." Mina didn't look surprised. "I always suspected that. There are Students Anonymous posts online. Same story. Different years, and I've got a team looking deeper." "Why now?" she asked. "Why go through all this trouble for someone like me?" "Because you were never just someone, and because people like him thrive in silence. If no one speaks up, nothing changes." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "You know, after I dropped out, I used to dream about walking into his class one day, dressed like a judge, or a CBI officer. Just to watch the color drain from his face, Sundar smiled. You still can, maybe not as an officer, but as someone who stands up and tells the truth. Her eyes flickered with doubt. What if they say I'm lying? What if they say I'm bitter and making it up? Then we prove them wrong, Sundar said. But we do it carefully, not in anger, in truth. He paused for a moment, then pulled out a folder from his bag. I drafted a proposal today, a full scholarship program, for young girls from underprivileged backgrounds, named after you. The Mina Foundation. We'll start with 100 students. If you want, you can help lead it. She looked stunned. Me? Who better than you? He said softly. You know what they're up against, and you know what they need. A tear slid down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, embarrassed. You're giving me my life back, she whispered. No. He said, you're reclaiming it. I'm just helping open the door. That night, Sundar sent out a single tweet. True leadership is not just building the future. It's healing the past. More soon. The post went viral within minutes. Speculation spread like wildfire. Media outlets began to pick it up. People from around the world started replying, offering stories, support, and asking what he meant. Sundar didn't reply. Not yet. Not until the truth was ready to be shared, but someone else had seen the tweet to Professor Basha at Anna University. In an air-conditioned office lined with awards, Professor Basha scrolled through the tweet. With narrowed eyes, the moment he saw Sundar's name and the cryptic message, he felt a strange tightness in his chest. Something about it felt personal, threatening. He had always known his past might catch up to him, but he had counted on silence, shame, fear. Those were powerful tools. He had used them for years, and they had served him well, but if someone like Sundar was involved, He stood up and paced the room. Mina, he thought. It has to be her. He picked up the phone and made a call. We may have a problem, he said. Start preparing a defense. And tell the university board this is a politically motivated attack. I want every shred of her background discredited. He hung up and stared out the window. But what he didn't know was that the tides had already begun to shift. 2 days later, Sundar walked into a small press room, flanked by journalists, human rights advocates, and educational reformers. He stood before the microphone and paused. For a long moment. Behind him, a large screen displayed a single photo Mina, sitting with her children under a bridge. From weeks earlier, this, Sundar began, is Mina. He told her story. The brilliance, the betrayal, the struggle, the silence. He didn't sensationalize it. He didn't use pity. He spoke with measured, honest words. Then he opened a folder. These, he said, holding up printed papers, are the anonymous statements of other women. Different years. Same professor. Same story. These women have lived in fear for too long. Gasps rippled through the room. Today, he continued, we are launching the Mina Foundation. And alongside that, we are opening a formal investigation into Professor Dharmesh Basha, funded privately with legal support for any survivor who wishes to come forward. Reporters exploded with questions. Cameras flashed. And halfway across the room, Mina sat quietly, watching the world finally hear her voice through someone who had once been just a shy boy in her classroom. But the press conference triggered a powerful reaction because Professor Basha didn't plan to go down quietly. He had connections, deep ones. And within hours, articles began appearing, questioning Mina's story, digging into her past, calling her unstable. Former colleagues of Basha gave public statements defending his character. News anchors began using words like, hey, sad, she said. And then it got worse. AASHA and Vivek were almost hit by a speeding car on their way. Back from the hotel park, the driver never stopped. Sundar got the call and rushed to the hotel, and thankfully they were unharmed. But the message was clear. Someone wanted to scare them into silence. And for the first time, Mina wavered. Maybe we should stop, she whispered. Maybe this is too dangerous for my children, For you, Sundar knelt in front of her. They are trying to break your spirit because they're afraid of the truth. That means we're winning. He looked her in the eyes and added, but it's your call. Not mine. She was quiet for a long time. Then she slowly stood up, held Asha's hand in one palm, Vivek's in the other, and said, we go forward. The war had truly begun, and neither of them knew just how deep the roots of corruption went. Asterisk. When the system fights back, a heavy monsoon rain poured over the city of Chennai, casting a dark shimmer on the streets as tires sliced through puddles and water clung to the sides of auto rickshaws. But inside a small office just a few kilometers from Anna University, the air was thick with more than humidity. It was tension, strategy, and a growing fire for justice. Sundar sat at the head of a long wooden table, surrounded by advocates, investigators, and a team of volunteers who had come forward from different corners of India activists, former students, journalists, and legal minds. The room was cramped, with old ceiling fans whirring above, but the energy inside it was electric. They weren't just planning a press release or organizing charity work, they were building a case against a man protected by decades of power and silence. Across the table, a woman named Devika placed a thick folder in front of Sundar. She was a former university administrator who had quietly resigned 4 years earlier. Now in her late 50s, she had seen too much, said too little, and carried the weight of regret every day. But something about Sundar's public stance had stirred something inside her. She had reached out through an anonymous message. And today she had walked in with everything. These, she said, tapping the folder, are sealed complaints. They were never acted upon. Some were buried by the board. Some disappeared entirely. Sundar opened the folder slowly. It was all there. Names, dates, statements from girls who were punished for speaking. Grades that had been mysteriously lowered. One girl had been suspended just weeks before finals. Another was forced to transfer to another college without explanation. And all the threads, all the incidents, led back to one man, Professor Dharmesh Basha. Sundar looked up. Why didn't you come forward earlier? Devika's eyes glistened. Fear. Pressure. When I tried to raise questions, they moved me to a lesser department. They warned me, said I could lose my pension. I had a sick husband, children to feed. I justified it at the time. But it never left me. Sundar nodded solemnly. You're here now. That's what matters. As they pieced together the timeline, it became clear this wasn't just about a predator in a classroom. This was about a system built to protect him. Colleagues who stayed silent, superiors who closed their eyes, students who were punished for speaking, and a university more concerned about its image than its children. We need to go public with this, Sundar said, not just through press conferences. We need survivors to speak in their own words. They won't come forward unless they feel safe, said one of the advocates, a young lawyer named Amir. They've seen what happens. The threats, the discrediting, the danger. Then we create a space where they feel protected, Sundar replied. We use technology. We anonymize faces, change voices. We give them power without exposing them. Within hours, they launched a platform, the Meena Voices, a secure website where survivors could share their stories. Some came as videos, others as audio, many as simple text entries. They came from different cities, different generations. And though the details varied, the patterns were heartbreakingly similar. He asked me to come to his office after hours. Said he needed to discuss my thesis. He locked the door. When I refused, he called me difficult and said girls like me never go far. I dropped out after he failed me. I never told my parents why. Within 48 hours, over 70 stories were submitted. Sundar read every single one. But the more powerful the movement grew, the more vicious the backlash became. Late one night, Asha woke up coughing. A strange chemical smell filled the hotel room. Meena rushed to the bathroom and found a canister. Near the vent, someone had tried to gas the room. The hotel immediately called the police, but the investigation was sluggish. Excuses piled up. Probably just a prank, one officer said. Kids get into trouble. Sundar didn't buy it. He quietly moved Meena and the children to a private residence under 24/7 security. But the attacks didn't stop. Sundar's email was hacked. Anonymous death threats arrived at his team's offices. And just 2 days later, one of the survivors who had shared her story publicly, an engineering professor named Shalini, was hit by a motorcycle while crossing the street. The rider disappeared before anyone could get his plate number. She survived, but her leg was fractured. From her hospital bed, she posted on social media, "They want us silent." But silence is what kept him powerful. I will not be silent anymore. The post exploded across social platforms. The hashtags #justice for MEENA and #StopBasha trended for days. Bollywood actors, authors, athletes, and even politicians began weighing in. Pressure mounted on the university to respond. Anna University released a statement. "We are deeply disturbed by the recent allegations. Professor Basha has voluntarily stepped aside pending review." But Sundar knew the language. Voluntarily stepped aside meant go rest until the fire cools. He wasn't going to let the fire cool. He called a press conference. This time, he wasn't alone. Meena stood beside him, wearing a simple cotton kurta, her hair pulled back. Asha and Vivek were seated quietly in the front row. Sundar began with a short statement, then stepped aside. Meena took the microphone. She looked out at the sea of cameras and flashing lights. Her voice trembled at first, but then it found strength. I was 17 when I walked into Professor Basha's, thinking he was there to help me. I left with a failing grade and a fear that followed me for 20 years. I lost my education, my dignity, my dreams. She paused. The room was silent, but I never lost my truth. She went on to describe her journey, not in a way that asked for pity, but in a way that demanded accountability. She spoke for the girls who didn't make it, the ones who had been silenced permanently. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, but even as applause erupted, Sundar's phone buzzed. He stepped away and answered. It was his lead investigator. "We found something," the voice said. "What is it?" "A payment trail from a private donor account to the university's legal department. Large sums, repeated every 6 months. And the account is linked to ... Linked to who?" Sundar asked sharply. "Someone in the Ministry of Education." Sundar froze. "Are you saying this goes beyond the university?" "Yes," the voice said. "I think we've stumbled into something much bigger." Sundar ended the call and turned back to the crowd, still applauding Meena's bravery. But his mind was racing. Someone powerful was funneling money to keep Basha. Protected. Someone in the government. And the closer Sundar got to the truth, the more dangerous it was going to get. That night, as he sat alone reviewing documents in his private suite, there was a knock at the door. A hotel staff member handed him a sealed envelope and walked away. Sundar opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed in bold letters, "Leave it alone, or the next thing you lose won't be your schedule." He stared at it for a long time. Then he looked at the photo of Meena and her kids on the desk. And he whispered to himself, "No, I'm just getting started." The shadow behind the curtain. Next morning, Sundar Pichai sat alone in a nondescript office tucked behind a small tech startup in Bengaluru. The world outside buzzed with its usual rhythm: students heading to classes, office workers sipping chai at roadside stalls, buses crawling through thick traffic. But inside this room, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Just the hum of electricity and the steady breathing of the two trusted members of his personal task force, Karan, a cyber forensics expert, and Neela, a former investigative journalist turned activist. Spread across the table in front of them were printouts, wireframe diagrams, and screenshots. Red arrows drawn in marker ink connected various figures and accounts. At the center of the storm was a name Sundar hadn't expected to see. Rajes Emma Aden. The current Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Education. A man often praised on television as a reformer, a man known for his eloquence on news panels. A man who, at least publicly, had supported policies for women's safety in educational institutions. But behind that image, behind the carefully rehearsed sound bites and polished shoots, was a trail of silent payoffs, hidden transactions, and a history of looking the other way when complaints were made. We confirmed it, Karen said. Multiple payments, offshore routing, always just below the threshold to trigger automatic investigation alerts. But consistent, and always following a pattern. Any time a complaint against Basha came close to the board, a payment followed. He was protecting him, Neela added. But the question is, why? Sundar stared at the photos on the table. One showed Rayesh shaking hands with Basha at a university event. Another showed a news article about Rayesh's son, Dr. Pranav Mahadevan, a former student at Anna University. And then it hit Sundar. His son studied there, he said, his voice suddenly cold. Wasn't he accused once? Neela nodded. Slowly. Yes, very quickly. But the student who accused him was blacklisted from every college in the region. Eventually left India. Her name was Naina Banerjee. Sundar closed his eyes. The pattern was repeating again and again. Young women silenced, lives derailed, futures stolen, all under the protection of powerful men who lived in luxury while their victims disappeared into the shadows. We have to bring it out, he said. Everything. Karen hesitated. We've already received threats. If we name a government official directly, they'll bury us under lawsuits, raids, even false charges. And Meena, she and her children are the most at risk. Sundar looked out the window, the storm clouds rolling over the skyline. He thought about Meena, how she had stood in front of flashing cameras, voice shaking but brave, telling the world her truth. He thought about the look in Asha's eyes when she spoke about becoming a doctor. And he thought about the millions of women who had never had that chance. We don't do this recklessly, but we do it. By the end of the day, they had compiled a full report, evidence, testimonies, and a detailed map of the cover-up. Sundar uploaded it to an encrypted cloud and distributed access to 3 independent news organizations, all known for their integrity. He then sat with Meena in the quiet garden of the residence where she and her children were staying under guard. Meena, he said gently, I need your permission to name your case in the report. She didn't flinch. You already have it. I didn't survive all this just to go back into hiding. He looked at her. The woman who had once been a girl dreaming of building satellites, now carrying the weight of generations of silence. There's one more thing. He added. She tilted her head. We're going to file a case. Not just against Basha, but against the university. And against Rayesh Mahadevan. Meena went still. That will make us targets. We already are, Sundar said quietly. But this will protect others. This will break the chain. I'm in, she said. 3 days later. The entire country watched in stunned silence as the full report was released across major news platforms. The headline read, Abuse, Silence, and Cover-Up, the Hidden Truth Inside India's Most Respected University. Beneath it, a video played, a masked voice reading the stories of over 100 women, their words echoing over soft music, their pain turning into collective power. Screenshots followed. Bank transfers, internal memos, emails from Rayesh's private account, photos of him with Basha, testimony from Devika and other insiders. And finally, Meena's story. Her face unblurred. Her name real. The internet erupted. Some people couldn't believe it. Others had always suspected it. Protests broke out at universities across the country. Hashtags like hashtag justice for MENA and hashtag resign, RAJES, flooded social media. Students organized rallies, professors demanded accountability, and women everywhere began sharing their own stories. That night, Sundar and Meena appeared on a national talk show. The host, known for never pulling punches, began with a simple question. Why now? Meena's voice was steady. Because the pain never left. It just went quiet. And silence is where injustice grows. Sundar followed. his tone clear and unwavering. This is not about revenge. This is about accountability. Institutions that silence victims don't just fail individuals, they fail society. But as the movement gained momentum, a darker wave rose behind the scenes. Early the next morning, police raided the house where Sundar had met with his team. They confiscated hard drives and documents under the pretext of a tax investigation. A member of the legal support team was arrested on false charges of fraud. Someone slashed the tires of the car that drove Mina's children to school. Sundar received an anonymous message, "You're next." But he didn't stop. Instead, he went to the Supreme Court of India and personally filed a public interest litigation against Professor Basha, Anna University, and the ministry official. Within hours, the story reached international media. The Guardian, CNN, the New York Times all began covering what they called India's #MeToo moment in education. And then the twist came. A young woman from overseas came forward. Her name was Naina Banerjee, the same woman who had accused Rayesh Mahadevan's son years ago. She had left India and built a new life in Canada. But she had never stopped searching for a way to be heard. And now, inspired by Meena, she sent in a sworn affidavit, complete with emails, chat logs, and recordings. Her testimony was a bombshell, clear, damning, undeniable. Within 24 hours, Rayesh Mahadevan resigned. The government announced a special commission to investigate harassment in higher education. But Basha still hadn't been arrested because he had disappeared. Vanished into the shadows, possibly aided by allies still in power. Sundar sat in a hotel room, reading the report, his jaw tight. "He's running," he muttered. "They're hiding him." Meena sat beside him. "Then we find him." "We will," he promised. But what neither of them knew was that Basha wasn't just running to avoid jail. He was planning something, and he wasn't finished. Not yet. The reckoning, it was just past midnight when the call came in. Sundar Pichai was reviewing the updated court documents when his phone lit up with a number he didn't recognize. Something in his gut turned cold as he answered. "Is this Sundar Pichai?" A hoarse voice asked. "Yes. Who is this?" A long pause. Then the man said, "I know where Basha is." Sundar sat up straight. "Who are you?" "Someone who worked with him. He's trying to leave the country. Tonight. From an airstrip outside Salem. Private flight. No customs. No record." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have daughters," the man replied, his voice breaking. "I should have spoken up years ago. But now, maybe this is how I make it right." The line went dead. Sundar didn't waste a second. He called Neela and Karen, woke his driver, and alerted the authorities. The airstrip wasn't a public one. It was an old agricultural site, converted by a wealthy industrialist who owed favors to powerful people. Exactly the kind of place someone like Basha would use to disappear. Within the hour, they were on the road, racing through dark highways under the blanket of clouds. The rain had started again, soft at first, then heavier, like the sky itself was weeping for all the women whose stories had been buried for too long. As they neared the location, Sundar's phone buzzed. A message from one of the intel officers he had worked with during the investigation. Confirmed. Basha is there. Flight due in 30 minutes. We're dispatching police, but arrival might be delayed due to weather. Delayed. That meant Sundar would reach before them. The road narrowed into a gravel path lined with thick trees. In the distance, they could see lights, flickering floodlights from the airstrip. Sundar's car stopped just short of the clearing. He stepped out into the rain, heart pounding, breath sharp. A small plane sat at the far end, engine whirring, and walking toward it. Dressed in a long coat was Dharmesh Basha. He didn't look like the arrogant professor from the glossy university brochures. He looked gaunt, restless, panicked. Beside him, a young man, possibly a pilot, was unlocking the door to the cabin. Sundar didn't think. He walked straight into the light, through the pouring rain, his voice loud and unyielding. "Stop!" "Right there." Basha turned, His face froze. You, he whispered, almost laughing. You just couldn't let it go. No, Sundar said, rain soaking through his clothes. Not this time. Basha's expression twisted. You think this makes you some kind of hero? You think saving a beggar girl and parading her on TV changes anything? You're not being hunted because of what I did, Sundar said. You're running because of what you did. And the truth caught up with you.